Hi everyone, welcome to the Life of Education podcast. So today we're here with Brian Reilly from Scotland, and you're also working at the Physio Centre.
Yes, I am. Quite fresh to here, to
Yeah,
Dubai.
you just got here.
Yep, fresh off the boat.
How are you finding it so far?
Yeah, enjoying it. Pretty different, and getting used to a different kind of clinical background for me, seeing how it's getting put together over
When
here.
did you arrive?
I just finished my third week.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Where were you? You were working in Scotland before, in the UK?
Yep, so I did all my studying in Scotland. I did my undergrad in Scotland. I was lucky enough to work in the NHS for all my junior training. Did my postgrad in Scotland, and then I did all my work in sport in private practice. Even did a wee bit of work with the military.
Oh yeah?
Yep.
Where were you with them?
I was up in Fazers in Faslane.
I was down in Tidworth before I came out
Yeah,
here.
I knew. Were you in ERI?
Yeah.
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 Who were you with?
The 1st Battalion, the Anglians, Royal Anglians.
Uh-huh. It's a good wee setup, isn't it? It's a good
Yeah,
way to get
yeah.
to know your job.
Oh mate, it was fantastic. Like the team I was working with, firstly the whole getting access to the whole military world, embedded in a camp for 18 months. But some of the physios that we worked with were so good, like top. I wouldn't have learned that much in such a short space of time anywhere else.
I think it's a very lucky setup with regards to what's available to them, whether it be clinical and diagnostic or whether it be rehabilitation and the end result.
Yeah.
But just when you've got that bit more finance available, it gives you that extra edge, unfortunately, and it's nothing special.
Yeah.
I think it's just to give the same consistency of treatment, immediacy of treatment, and then the high-end rehab. Obviously, a lot of those guys need it.
Yeah.
Guys and girls, but they need that high-end to stop them coming back in. But I could see some parallels with my work in NHS, and then unfortunately I could see some differs because of the split, even just the monetary.
Yeah.
I think it gave a better service.
Yeah, no, I learned so much there. So what was it a regiment? Was it an Air Force?
No, that's HNMB Clyde, so it's the submarine base.
Oh, really?
I'm probably not allowed to say that, I'll probably get shot. That's well known. But they had 6,000 people on site, and you had 40 commando up there, so
Yeah.
they were pretty elite, those guys.
So what made you come out here then?
Something different,
Yeah.
really. Yeah, and it rains all the time in Glasgow.
I knew you were going to say the weather. I was waiting for it.
It's a fact.
Yeah.
It is wet and grey for 364 days a year.
Yeah, whereas here it's sunshine 364 days a year.
Yeah.
My gingerness is struggling with the sun already. So.
Yeah.
Getting heat stroke and sunstroke already.
Yeah, you've come into it's the end of the summer now, so the weather's getting better.
Everyone keeps saying that.
Yeah.
It just makes me really worried for the summer.
Yeah, well, it's beautiful now.
Yeah.
Really, it's
Yeah.
scary. So today you're here to talk about some fitness myths and some physio myths, right? So maybe you can lead us into that.
I thought I would talk about some, or as we coined it, myth busting.
Yeah.
I think in this day and age there is a lot of information. There's lots of access to information, whether it's internet, social media, and if someone's got a good idea or something looks good or has got a good theory, it tends to get out there. And a part of my job, and hopefully my profession's job in the health and fitness profession, is to make sure that we're picking the right bits of information and not just seeing something and presuming it's kind of golden.
Yeah.
So I thought I'd maybe try and think of some of the things which have maybe got grown arms and legs, or things which have become in the mainstream,
Fads.
but I maybe actually don't have that much of an evidence base behind them to suggest that they're usable.
Yeah, do you know what? I think that's really important, because I find this with news as well. Things have become so opinion-based as opposed to factual. And this, you're right, absolutely right. There's so much on the internet, and people don't understand what's fact-based and what's opinion-based. And on top of that, then you have even research that's funded by certain people that could be misleading just because of where it's been funded from. I don't want to get too controversial, but
No, I think that is a massive part of medical research, is the bias in it, and I won't bore anyone, but I think working out what is good research and what is bad, why it's getting done. Is it done just to make the right answer available, or is it done because someone's got a alternative motive behind it that suits them? So yeah.
So what's the first myth that we're going to talk
Oh,
about?
I think for me getting into this was I spent 2.5 years practicing techniques in Glasgow, which I still use, and if I put them into a category, they would be myofascial release. And myofascial release is suggested of manual or physical techniques to change the body's fascial system, And the concept is that the fascial system is the connective tissue, so it's not muscular, it's not contractive, and it's not ligamentous. It doesn't hold joints together individually, but it runs in the full plane. So you've got I'm going to forget all the names of them now, but you've got the posterior plane fascia, you've got your crossovers through your abdominals.
This is like anatomy trains stuff.
Exactly, and a wee bit less than just anatomy train, because anatomy train would include your active components as well, but the fascia is that thickened tissue which holds it in place. And I spent a long time learning about it, and a long time learning the techniques to release it, and doing my courses and practicing and doing CPD. And then a couple of times I would do it on someone and I'd get really good results. I'd get pain free, people were really happy, wanted to come back and see me, comfortable enough to start exercising or to get to the goals that they wanted to. But in a lot of the times, or as much as half, I'd get some people maybe with a similar condition, similar age range, similar complaints, do the technique, and I'd get very little. So it got really hard for me because it wasn't consistent enough. And when I saw them inconsistencies, I started to look into it. And there's a concept in fascia and there's information on fascia, but there's nothing to guarantee the system. That's not been tried and tested in the kind of scientific realm. There's not enough to say, look at this person getting this fascial treatment and this person not. What's the difference? Or on an MRI, is it actually mobile? Or can my hands from the skin actually sink down and change that tissue?
Now, I've heard, in just relating this over to fitness, there's a lot of, and we've discussed this before, when people get on foam rollers and it's like, oh, you're releasing all of the fascia in your body, and a lot of research, or a lot of people that we've talked to recently say, well, actually it's not really entirely doing that. It's more like a skin stimulation and stimulation of the area as opposed to
Let's get
actual
into our
fascial.
first myth.
Oh,
Yeah, go straight in.
amazing.
So where do you lie? Sorry to interrupt you. Where do you lie on that then? So you said you're coached fascia, do this, you get great results, I'm expecting. And then you go out into the practical world and it's not equating.
I wouldn't even say it is in the practical world that it wasn't equating. In the practical world it was 1 and 2 probably.
Okay.
So, it just made me start to look into it and think what maybe is actually happening. I get told I was releasing fascia to make the thing, to give the fascia time to relax. It let the tissues underneath move better, gave more joint range of motion. And then in some of the cases I didn't see that, so it made me think, what is the process that's actually happening?
And what do you think it is from your research?
If we look at foam rolling, the foam rolling's a really, really good one. Hot topic, came around in the kind of 90s, a lot of runners using it. I think it made the mainstream with a mainstream but a mainstream system, CrossFit. I think brought a lot of
Bad.
yeah, it's probably a wrong choice.
Interesting.
I'm going to get slagged off there. I did it myself for several years. I think what I was meaning is something that has as much of a marketing scheme behind it, is well known quickly. I think there's the theories of some of the best guys on chatting about foam rolling just now are from athletics backgrounds, running, and they're in the early 90s kind of using it before and after training. For me, I thought it kind of hit the UK in that mid 2000s when the kind of CrossFit made it over from America, and more people started to do that, and other cross balls. Physiologically, let's take something like the ITB. Everyone sits on the side of that ITB on the thigh for hours at a time, and something about the stronger it feels, or the more uncomfortable it is, it must be doing more for my body. The ITB, they reckon it takes, and I'm maybe going to get this number wrong, but they reckon it takes about 400 newtons to move it 3 millimeters.
I've heard that fascia is like, you need like a truck to actually release it.
Yeah, when we were in university, we were told by our anatomy guy who used to work with cadavers that they've tested ITB and reinforced concrete, and they've only separated the two at the same amount of force. So I don't know if that is the 400 newtons, but that's kind of
that's
how
a lot. That's a lot. So literally a roll is doing nothing.
And then the second bit about the ITB is it's pinned to your femur, your bone. So it's hard to work out why that direct pressure on it is going to release it, in a sense.
Yeah.
And then the interesting part from that is if you're wanting release or lengthening, maybe a lot of people, runner's knee, everyone used to talk about that, pinning on the right hand side, and it changed the shape of your shin, and runner's knee pain in the outside.
Yeah, I've heard people say that a lot too. They're like, oh, if you get pain in your knee and you run, you roll out your ITB on your knee and then it should be fine.
Now the premise of that is that your ITB is maybe tight, as they talked, or shortened, so they're trying to lengthen it with the roller. But a roller is a compressive force, a push. Stretching is a pull, a tensile force. So even the physics of it as a treatment isn't kind of adding up into that. And back to your point about the kind of skin activation, there's some good research to show that between the first couple of minutes up to 5 minutes is really good for kind of peripheral blood flow in the area, and that sort of stuff is maybe why you feel better.
And sensory skin stimulation.
And it's huge sensory skin stimulation. It's all, they reckon it's hugely nervous. Yeah. Massively nervous. Saying that, and it's back to the thing that I did with my manual techniques, people feel better after it. So it's a really hard one that it might not be saying what it does in the tin, but there's some people who like it. There's some elite sports stars who will not take that out of their regime because it's partly psychological, because it does.
So it's like a placebo effect.
Good, and it's the regime. So it's really interesting to then have to come and say, oh, don't do that, the research isn't good enough, because there's so many people that get benefit from it. But is it helping the fascial argument? Probably not. It's kind of, is it helping disprove it in a sense that it's easy to kind of say, oh, that's fascia, or you're doing fascia on that, and there's, I don't know, like the Theraguns, have you seen the jigsaw guns and all these things? They're all kind of saying, if they hear a buzzword maybe like fascia, they're jumping in and saying, oh, this
helps the fascia.
This helps as well, but it's quite, there's nothing proven.
Where are they on the research on fascia? Do they completely understand it?
Nope.
Yeah,
and I think that's the thing for me why I've veered away from it.
Yeah.
And it's not even to completely understanding it or to partially understanding it. It's not the greatest. It's there written in concept, and I think for me that's what I like to geek out in my kind of science side of things. Is that concept and theory quite different, and theory gets banded around. Some people say, oh, it's just an evolutionary theory, but the theory is where the concept is written and the hypotenuse is made, and then it's proven. Yeah. And then the concept is just that it's the idea, and the concept of fascia is really good. It works on your anatomy trains or your locomotive trains and your cross-sectional forces, and the body being connected, which would be lovely if it, it would really kind of work. But when you put into anatomical studies or when you put into physiotherapeutic studies, then it's really hard to match it up together with good level evidence, so good quality evidence, and a lot of it.
One thing you said, which I'd be interested to ask, you're in the clinic and you're doing your test and 1 in 2 people aren't responding to it. How, not to say anything about your own skills, but how do you know it's not a technique thing that you're doing?
Great question. It could well be.
Yeah.
But if we look at some more physio myths, have you ever had something like a spinal mobilization?
Yeah, I've had lots of it.
When you push the single segment down.
Yeah. I love it.
Yeah, it feels good.
It feels amazing.
I was thinking about how many you must have had. What was the last thing you just said? The spinal mobilization.
Yeah. Basically, it's like they get to your vertebra. So you could probably explain this better. And then they just do this. And it feels like someone's just palpating it, but it feels like it's moving. And
when
so one at a time.
I understand.
And you can actually feel when they're really tight, you can feel that it's almost like it feels locked, and then some of them feel really mobile, and then the ones that are really tight, you just get like...
So Caroline's had 2 of her vertebrae reconstructed.
I watched your guys' first one of the aloes.
Yes.
So I'm up to speed.
Amazing.
The one where we're both brand new to it, fresh, don't really know what we're doing perfect.
So I'm sure you would have, especially
actually with Miffy.
So the spinal mobilization is developed by a guy called Maitland. It's quite an old school train of thought, old school just in date, mid kind of 19th century. And the idea is that a vertebral body, so anything from cervical, thorax or lumbar, has got a plane of movement. So you've got your active one, so forward, back, left, right rotation, side bend. But it's also got a transverse plane. The body can't move it in that, but a therapist could. So if they lie the person down and apply a perpendicular force on a spinous process, you should be able to move that whole vertebral body perpendicularly.
From back to front.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Interestingly, like you said, when you find that one tight one, and it's just, it's really, really, really tight, and it's great. If you look at the research, which looks at me versus Keith, picking the same spot in your body every time, it's really low. So I could say, I've got L2, and L2 is the one that moves a lot, and L3 is the one that's not moving, and you need to do L3. You keep coming around, and he could get something completely different. The inter-rated reliability of something which we think is quite simple, of finding a bone and pressing it, is really low. So
But does that have something to do with your own personal tactile, like
feedback?
Yes.
Yeah.
Like whether, I don't know how to explain this, but you putting pressure on something and perceiving that that's a lot of pressure, as opposed to Keith putting pressure on something and perceiving that that's
And if
not very much.
if they look
right?
at the pressure one, there's enough evidence to show that people's pressures are different. But the worrying thing is there's lots of evidence to show that people can't hit the same spot twice.
Oh, okay.
So
I
if they
see.
say to you, oh, it's your L3, it's at fault, and I need to treat L3, they're not actually technically getting L3 every time. They're just getting the whole spine. So when it comes back to you saying, is it a technique thing for me for a technique like fascia? It could well be. But on a simple palpatory treatment like MOBS, we know that the ability between 1 to 2 therapists, or 1 to 3 therapists, 1 to 4 is really low. So the chances of it happening in fascia is also the same.
Yeah.
And there could be some people, there is some people out there with very good hands, but the consistency is not there to say, if you do A plus B, you're going to get the result, which is where I think a lot of, and I'll hold them to the end, but a lot of the things I'm talking about today are the myths. Kind of wonder saying, why did that 1 and 2 people get better then?
Yeah.
And I think we'll hopefully lead into maybe some talk about pain and some stuff.
Well, that's what I was thinking. That's kind of my view on fascia, is that you're almost just treating the nervous system in another way, and you're causing a release through the chain.
I think, we
in
both
ways that are above my understanding, but everything comes back to the nervous system in my view, and I don't fully understand it, so I can't go into any sort of in-depth kind of overview of it. But I think everybody's body, this is what I tell people, why does a fascia release work for one person and I refer someone with the same condition to another, to the same physio, they get nothing, but that person will have gone to a chiro, got great results. And I sort of believe, and this is just through my own collecting data, people's nervous systems crave attention
and it's stimulation.
Like in some sort, and we don't know which is which.
Or some of them crave the opposite, where they're overly stimulated and they need the opposite.
So the nervous system is craving something, and we don't know what as humans, because it's in the brain. So somebody will go for a fascia release and they've got it spot on. That's the one. Whatever it is, whatever they did, the signals went to the brain relaxed, and they got an extra bit of length. Somebody else goes, their body's craving maybe an adjustment, some sort of vertebral to stimulate the brain. Maybe somebody else just needs a nice, soft, gentle, like you said, calming massage to calm their nervous system down for them to get the release. And this is kind of what I tell people, is don't just listen to your colleague at work who went to that fascial lady and said, boom, that's the one for me. I had the exact same issue, my knee, my hip, she sorted me out. And don't lose faith when it doesn't work for you.
I think, sorry to interrupt you there, that's why there's so many different treatment modalities, because people are really different. People respond to treatments very, very differently, and some things are going to work for some people and others are not. You're probably better versed at this. So.
No, because it's all three of us are in agreement on this, so I'm not going to be better placed than anyone. Personally, I think there is a treatment for everyone. It might be different. I think they've managed to have really strong evidence to show that homeopathy isn't the strongest form of medicine, but there's people out there who only feel better with it. Reflexology is something quite similar, and there's people that's all they get. There's people that want chiro adjustment. There's people that demand acupuncture or dry needling, and that goes into something similar to you're saying there, Keith, about the nervous system craving something. You've got the psychological part of it, and that is part of the nervous system. People kind of forget, or maybe not forget, aren't educated in pain. I think we're in the school that breaks, that generates pain. That pain comes up a pain nerve, and that pain nerve goes into the pain bit of the spine and then hits the pain bit of the brain, and we just know that's not the best.
We know there's a structural
model.
issue there. That's what they think.
Yep. And even if we go on a structural issue, it's not technically a pain nerve. It's just a nerve that carries a signal up. I heard a really good quote the other day. You don't have sight in your eyes. You don't have sound in your ears. You don't have pain in your nerves. It's all interpreted in the brain. It's all information. It's vibration. It's light. And it's a nerve structure.
Isn't pain just an output, right?
Well, it is. It's a number of things, and that's where it becomes so hard. It's also probably why there's so many treatments for it. Pain is a picture. You know, it's trying to find a damaged area to stop it getting worse.
Yeah.
It's also a memory. How many times have you stubbed your toe? First time, the worst. Now, can carry on and depending. You know, it's like
I understand.
It's that pain memory. It's what did I do the last time? How did it affect me?
Yeah.
Is it damaging? Was it bad?
It's like after a workout. The first leg workout you do after a year of nothing, you're in agony.
Yeah.
And maybe your muscles have worked a little bit extra than they would have the last time, but it's that pain, it's that shock, it's that...
Yeah, exactly. So you've got that in pain patterns, but then you've got also other things in pain. You've got how society guides you in pain. You know, everybody thinks back pain's the worst thing.
Yeah.
As soon as you get a bit, there's some people who just take that and run, and their brain is overworked because they have seen so many things on Lad Bible about people being 90 degrees bent, and if you've seen so many things in the paper about people needing 6 months off work. So the multifactorial side of pain makes it really quite interesting. It's probably why there's lots of treatments out there. Somebody thinks that whatever the thing is causing them their problem is going to get fixed by reflexology, then it probably will work for them.
So is that the myth that you're kind of tiptoeing around, the difference between pain?
Yes, so let's look at structural things. You mentioned structural damage.
Yeah.
There is a really good, I'm sure he's Dutch, and I'm going to forget his name. I'm not even going to try it. It probably is wrong. It's got a couple of J's, a K and an I in there. And 20...
You could say it and we'll just blame your accent.
Yeah.
I want to say Berdinsky et al. In
Perfect.
2015.
Sounds correct.
Took 1,400 people and chucked them in an MRI. And these people were asymptomatic, so no pain. And he specifically looked at their backs. So he MRI'd scanned their backs. And all these people, which was quite a large study for anything in healthcare in the one go, had no pain in their backs. And he got all their scans up and started having a look. And the information he got back from the scans of people without pain would probably shock you.
Yeah.
I can imagine a huge majority had some type of like disc problem or...
Exactly.
Yeah.
So they reckon in the 20 to 30 year old age group, you've got 60% of people having the disc degeneration. 30 to 40 years old, you had a really high percentage of people with signs of degeneration and a bulge. And then in 40 to 50, you had something like 40% of people with a really large protrusion bulge in the back. And this went all the way up to people that were 70. And these people are asymptomatic without pain, and they've got the one thing which I'm sure you've heard clients or colleagues or people you've treated say, oh, I've got a bulge or I've got this thing pushing out and it's causing my leg pain and things. And all of a sudden we've got a lot of amount of data to say it's not always the structure which causes the pain. I know it is in cases, but it's not as clear cut as we used to think of. That thing touches that nerve and you get pain. Now there is a suggestion with a disc that when it breaks or when it rubs or when it becomes irritated, the chemical response which is going through and its breakdown is enough to chemically irritate the nerve that's next to it.
Okay.
So there's a big part in that. So there is a nerve irritation, not oppression always, not like a nip or a rub, but just the chemicals in the area is enough to
I can't remember. I've heard that before too. I can't remember what it's called. Something, the proteins that are released.
Yeah.
The
it's
name.
blank for me as well, but it's to do with the inflammatory intermediaries, I think, and some of I think it's I had it as well there. I'm going to remember them. Yeah. So it's the proteins in the body which should do with pain. Well, one to do with pain transmission, but also the ones that are brought in when there is a kind of pain episode. So we've got enough information on the back to know it's not always the disc that's causing it. We've got really similar studies in the neck to show the exact same thing. And we've got other studies to show that even the level of nerve compression doesn't equate to the amount of leg pain or how far the leg pain goes.
Interesting, yeah.
So there's enough pain science now to prove that it's not always, in fact, it's normally not always the structure.
Yeah.
There may be a damaged structure, but it's not the structure generating the signals, and then two, the pain episode. And what the hardest thing for us guys who are working with movement is the pain behaviours. When people start to fear pain and stop moving and stop working.
Do you know what I find? Sorry, were you about to talk?
No, go
I was
ahead.
going to say something that's really interesting. This just stems from my own personal experience. Once you get injured, it's very easy to stay with like attached to your injury. Like, oh, I have this condition, and then to stay that way forever. And I think one of the biggest lessons that I had and that we spoke about a lot is like a huge part of healing and recovering is actually letting go of that attachment. So now I talk to myself in my own head. I'm totally fine. I've got nothing wrong with me. I can do everything. So I literally try and do everything. Which is interesting, not having that attachment to, oh no, I can't do this because of my back, or I can't do this because of my hip, or I can't do this because of my feet. So instead I think, okay, well, like, let's see, maybe my feet can do it. So anyway, that's, I find psychologically is the biggest thing. As soon as that changed, everything else in my body.
We spoke briefly about this with Ollie on one of the podcasts about pain, and you'll know. Well, I may have told this story before, but I had a guy with the military, sergeant, come back off tour, back pain, scans, all clear, and for people who don't know, when you have your issue, you're taken out of the usual day job part of the military. So he has a whole list of chores and day jobs that he can't do because he's on the sick list. So his seniors are putting a lot of pressure on him to get back to work, and he's complaining of this back pain, but his scans are coming back clear. And somehow people find out, oh, your scans are clear, and they accuse him of being weak and faking it and making a big deal just so he can get out of work. And he comes to me and he's like, almost in tears, you know. I remember it was a Friday before the weekend, and I gave him this analogy of how if you have a shower every day and you go out at a certain temperature and you go out that day and you get sunburned, and you get back into the shower at the end of the day, it feels like that water's burning your skin. But we know the temperature is not actually causing any damage, it's just the nerves in the area are super sensitive. So you can be feeling pain separate to the actual structural damage. And I could just see the cogs. I went into a bit more detail, but I could just see the cogs turning over in his head as he was laser focused on what I was saying. Came back in on the Monday and he was like, mate, I could play out my kids over the weekend. It was amazing. I don't feel 100%, but I was like, I didn't say anything to him. I was like, perfect, great, all right, well, let's see if you can do this. See if you can do this lunge. See if you can rotate. See if you can do this. See if you can do that. And we pushed him through about another less than 2 weeks, and then we got him back into the kind of the discharge group.
And I think that's a really good example of kind of persistent pain and the power of
the mind
interpretation. Yeah. And I've had very similar guys in the Navy. Unfortunately, if you're not active in the Navy, you get a desk job and you become slightly deconditioned, let's say.
Yeah.
So we saw a lot of guys with a pressured job in a military setting, so they're away from their families. They're in a base in Scotland with a lot of people, and they would develop back pain, and then we would scan them, and the scans would maybe show one or two things, but their symptoms, if you wanted to say, wouldn't marry up.
Yeah.
And people they would find it hard to interpret, and they'd say, "Is it in my head?" And that's a really damaging phrase, because all pain is
in your head,
interpreted in your head, but the in your head one is people suggesting they're making it up.
They're fabricating
like
it,
yeah. And now, it used to be because we would say, oh, that disc's doing that for an acute episode, and you look at the guy with the persistent pain, the long-term pain, and you go, oh, you've not got that, that's wrong.
Yeah.
But we now know, actually, that it's the acute model that's wrong. It's not always these pops and bursts and joints rubbing together that's causing it, but it's our pain pathways, the biology of our pain and our interpretation of pain.
Yeah, and how we react to it. I know every time I get scanned, my doctor's like, don't do this, don't do that, don't do this, don't run, don't walk, don't like blah, 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 blah. And I'm like, I'm not going to listen to you. So that's the total opposite.
Yeah, I don't know if I'd recommend that, but
no,
I wouldn't recommend that to people, but for me, it works just fine.
But that's a great, so to get your personal experience on that, because of your type of injury, not only is it uncomfortable how it happened, but it was an episode. And we'll see a lot of people who have had a large episode in their life which accounts to their pain. So like you're saying there, you were previously saying how you make yourself do it and how you've tried to detach yourself from your pain. It's brilliant. There's a lot of people out there who don't have that insight. And when you've got maybe a medical professional in a white coat saying, don't do this and don't do that, it's really hard for them to separate further, because that's reinforcing that feeling that they had, which was, you know, this is really bad for me and I'm the only one with this and my body's breaking down. And
isn't it, again, sorry to interrupt you, is it Lauren Mosley who wrote Explain Pain? I think they talk about pain education as being one of the milestones of allowing people to get out of pain, is for them to really understand the process and understand how it works and why we experience pain, and that helps people to get out of pain. So it's that education when people are in pain and they're going to see their coach or their personal trainer, and these people are reinforcing that for them to understand, okay, well, they're obviously working to the most conservative estimates because they don't want any liability against them, but it's about the student or the client itself actually educating themselves about their injury and blah blah blah.
It's also about the coach understanding, so the coach can explain pain, the coach can explain what heart rate zone we need to work in to lose weight, they can explain how many reps and sets we need to do to gain or build muscle or whatever. But how do we manage pain? Go to your physio, and then you're just sort of waiting for information on when this person is back so that we can push them hard again, and then they break again. Do you know? I think understanding pain is so important, because you don't necessarily have to be a rehab trainer to deal with people who are in pain, because the majority of people will rock up to the gym, and we've said this before, when you get through the initial consultation, you suddenly start to discover, they do have an old knee issue, creating apprehension, creating maybe not pain, but creating a pushback. Okay, a quick bit of education on pain and prevention of pain and management of pain will solve that, and then we can go off again. So I think everyone's carrying little knocks and niggles. If the coaches in the world understand what pain is, and I think it's just a matter of time, because people are talking about it more and more now. Like, we've had many people mention pain and the education that's growing around what pain actually is, compared to where it was when I started as a PT in early 2000s.
Yeah, even like I remember being a kid and you'd like fracture your arm or something, and no, you can't move it for 6 weeks, and so you'd literally be in a cast or a sling and now you fracture an arm, not a clean break, like just a fracture, and they're like, okay, a week still, then move, and you start doing like mobility exercises. So it's interesting how things have changed. Yeah, a lot. Anyway, so recapping, pain is complex.
Yes and no.
No.
We know a lot about it now. We know a lot more about it. It's not that it's complicated, it's complex, and it's just got a kind of ecosystem. It's got several components to it. It's not as simple as something breaks, you get the information.
And that component is the human component.
It's the human component. Yeah. Probably why we talked about. Once you do that thing, that education with the client, the rehab, they get that light bulb, they feel more comfortable, they perform better. Probably why when I still do my myofascial techniques to people, they feel more comfortable, and then we're able to progress on, because they're getting that security that somebody's helping them. They're getting that education on it's probably not as bad as they first perceived, and they're also getting that psychological thing when they've been holding on to a worry about pain or a condition, that psychological relief that someone's actually helping them, and they naturally feel better. Yeah. That's why massage does a small amount for the muscle tissues, but everyone just feels
great after it.
Yeah, it's so nice to be touched too. Like sometimes when people touch those areas of your body that never get touched, it's like, oh, that feels so good.
Yeah. So there's a conversation I had with Miffy in clinic the other day, and I would really love to be straight and narrow with the research stuff. I'd like to say this is proven and that's not. But in a role like physiotherapy, where we are the one professionals who are able to get information from touch and who people are expecting to get touched, whether for an assessment or for a treatment, it's really important to be able to keep those skills, because people do feel better. And there was a while where chronic pain patients, it was, right, stop doing manual treatment to them because they became attached to it or they became dependent on it.
Okay, interesting, yeah.
And that, for a while there was a couple of trusts in the NHS in England where physios were not allowed to do manual therapy on patients who had back pain for 6 months. Just a blanket no. They didn't work out the difference in the people. Just a blanket no, because they thought. But now, even with this, pain science we're talking about, and all the people talking about it and all the research into it, is that manual therapy will help because it will help the psyche of the patient. They will feel better, relaxed, something's getting done to them, and that's where we can almost improve in that trust.
Yeah.
That patient to therapist trust, the patient to trainer trust, that they know what you're talking about and they will listen to you, and when you show them some other results, they'll take that on board as well. So Be in Touch does feel great, and Be in Touch is a really useful tool to help bring pain levels down, to relax. There's probably a serotonin release in there as well, and then there's also the help. If somebody came to you for help, or came to you to get stronger, or to do a move better, or to pick up their kids, so they're getting help, which is also that huge part of the body, or the human psyche, is we think we can do it ourselves, but we're a sociable animal, so I think getting that back up.
So what else then is
I'm
on
so
your mind?
interested. What else are we going to talk about?
Well, for me, the reason I like to talk about this is if we go back to the talking about a doctor or someone, not even all doctors, but someone saying don't do this and don't do that. I think there's a lot of damaging information that can get handled, or not even that, damaging words. There's a bit of a good physio debate right now. Is it the words, or is it the person telling them? But there's a lot of things. I mean, have you had a client come into you and say, well, I was at a chiropractor, I'm just picking that for no reason, and they said my hips here and my pelvis rotated and I've got that bad ankle and stuff, and they are that almost like pain, that model they've built up in their brain of their body is really fixed, that's for them. So if they're really fixing that, no work that you're going to do is going to alter that for them. And there's enough research out there, so people looked at the postural biomechanical model, which is to say, is your hip left and right, or your ilium left and right, is it forward and back? Are your shoulder blades off centre? Is your neck rotated?
So this is like a gait analysis and a standing postural analysis.
Yeah, but more than that, it was one of the big models of physiotherapy and biomechanics. Is that your biomechanics, your position caused either injury or caused pain. And they did enough research to show, they did a load on pregnant females because they expected change in their ligaments during pregnancy to allow for some sacroiliac joint change, and they showed regardless of what happened in their postural measurements, didn't predict pain.
Okay.
So there wasn't a set pattern of hip left, foot drop right, knee in rotation and shoulder blade anterior, which would then give you back pain. And it goes into, everyone's a bit different and changes, but if they're getting fed that biomechanics is all off, they're going to think they've got some sort of deficit, and they're maybe not going to exercise as well, or when they get sore, they're not going to have that ability to go to the gym and kind of work it out.
I think in that regard, it's important then for people to understand that their own bodies are malleable and change, and it's important then to think, okay, well, I can't keep my mind and the idea of my body fixed. That also needs to change and adapt to whatever it is. So if we had, say, 15 years ago I had this, that postural kind of thing that you were talking about, not assuming that 15 years later it's going to be the same thing.
That's huge.
Yeah,
really
really big.
Agree. And in almost every, not just pain, in how people perceive their ability to run, walk, lose weight, gain weight, what food they're tolerant to, what food they're in. That's to compare yourself. It's a habit that even I fall into. I think everyone falls into. It's like you do a thing gosh, this is so much more difficult than it used to be, and you still consider yourself that 24-year-old who was sort of peaking in almost all facets of your physical ability, and now it's like, ooh.
Yeah, well, even I remember bumping into a friend in the mall maybe about a couple of months ago, and she saw me from far away and she's like, I didn't even recognize it was you because you weren't limping. And in my mind I was like, no, I'm still limping. And then I remember looking in a mirror, this is ridiculous, but I was watching myself walk and I was like, oh shit, I'm not actually limping.
Uh-oh.
And in my head I really was still. It's crazy until someone said it to me, here, totally fixed, until that perception was forced to be different. So I'd had this model of what my body looked like and what it was doing and how it was moving, and that it wasn't the case anymore. So I was
Might you say you were attached to your limp?
Yes, I was, because it was the new way that I was walking.
Yeah, you brought it everywhere. Yeah.
Anyway, I did, and now it's gone.
If we so there's lots of research, especially into back pain, on this kind of postural model. A lot of meta-analysis. So meta-analysis would be looking at systematic reviews, and a systematic review would be looking at lots of RCTs. So a meta-analysis is a very large amount of information brought together, and then they try and put a figure on all the things they're looking at, all the studies they're looking at, and rather than just say a summary of the studies, they try and put some data onto it. And there was some huge meta-analysis. In fact, any interesting things that I've talked about today, I'll happily give you a reference, and you can pop it in the comments or something.
Yeah,
so
for sure, you can do that.
Yeah, that sounds really good.
And there's enough data to show that the biomechanical postural change model isn't enough to generate or coincide or correlate with predicted pain. But my favourite one to kind of show this off is the foot. Let's see from a kind of PT rehab point of view. Somebody's footwork in walking or squatting, what's the one movement you'd always sort of be looking?
What's the range of
pronation?
What's the range of dorsiflexion?
Yeah.
I like your thinking, that's good. What's the one you quite often hear about everyone talk about getting corrective trainers for, or having to do corrective exercises?
What happens at the arch?
Yeah, so that overpronation.
Yeah.
Yeah. There's a very good podiatrist, sports podiatrist called Ian Griffiths. And he is out there. It's the stuff I was talking to you at the start. There's a lot of good information out there. There's a lot of people getting it out there now. When I was at university, I was lucky enough that I was at a time where you were researching on online and you were getting all your research studies. But now there's people, clinicians out there that want to get the good word out there so much that they are giving it, they're feeding it, they're posting it. And he looked at a review of the evidence for pronation of the foot. And the pronation of the foot model came around from the 70s. And they looked at the foot and the mechanics of it, the physical mechanics, the physics of the forces, and said this should be zero, that should be your midfoot, your neutral position, so that anybody who is this side of it is overpronating, and anyone or underpronating, and everyone who's this side of it is overpronating. But a really good comment he said was, if you hit a golf ball and you overhit it, you need to know how far you're aiming for in the beginning to know how much you put it past. And unfortunately, they cannot find a good method to work out how far pronation should and shouldn't be. To actually try and measure the talus, which is the foot bone in the ankle joint, to work it at zero. They get 10 different measurements from 10 different podiatrists, no matter if they try and use electronic camera or just visual. And then even then, there is no link between how much your foot pronates and any other lower limb injury. But it used to be, that foot's in and that's going to give him tibialis posterior pain, or that's why he's got hip pain. And I can understand the link in the chain. I looked at it, I'd see that, I'd probably did that as practice for a number of years. But if we look at the research for it, we're showing that we're not actually accurate enough to say, me to you, my talus is in the right position and yours is overpronated. So it might just be that the human body's normal is a bit kind of funky. And it's how we interpret that. So if somebody says, I've got this, then they're out buying the shoes and they're out coming to you saying, I've got this. But if you don't tell them it, then you've probably got a guy that's running marathons that's never been told it. It's absolutely fine.
Interesting. But I think what you said there is quite important. You said you may have practiced that for a couple of years and then continued to research, and then your thought process changed. Because I think that's very common with people, is you do have one style when you start in the profession, and then slowly over the years, the more you learn, the more you see with people, you sort of maybe go into a niche more than a general. You kind of educated on everybody, and then working with general population office workers as opposed to athletes, you'll see some more of something. So you start to build a clear picture on new things. You're allowed to change your processes, you're allowed to change your thinking, and you're allowed to change your systems. I think that's very important for people, that you don't have to stand by what you read in a
20
course.
years ago.
Yeah, a long time ago. Or even if you read something, it's not good enough to just negate it or bat it down as, okay, that's not the way it is. You just must stay evolving.
Well, I think that's exactly what you guys are doing with Allo. I mean, this is an education platform.
Yeah.
And it's starting off as education, but once someone gets that nugget, you're hoping that will engage some reflective practice, and then that engages some reflective practice. They say, well, what did I do before? What do I do now? And what are my goals? Or what did I do for patients before? What can I help with patients now? Or where would I like to get them to? And physiotherapy, luckily, now is a reflective practice. It's been ingrained into us from university. Interestingly, though, to deliver a course like physiotherapy, which has got so many different angles on it, for my opinion, they had to go with the mainstream, the broad structure of physiotherapy. They did well enough to show us reflective practice and changing practice, that we've picked these things up ourselves, and they did a lot to show us about evidence-based medicine, to say that you really have to be able to prove that this is going to help someone to do it. But there's definitely nothing wrong in being able to say that you're wrong.
Yeah.
And that as long as you get a benefit from that and go further on, it's going to...
Well, let me ask you this, before we kind of finish up. What advice would you have for a PT or someone in the industry who wants to go into physiotherapy, who's kind of working in the gym environment now? Obviously, they've got to get themselves back through an education system. That aside, like,
Keith, is this something you want to do?
This is something I've avoided doing, to be honest.
Good on you.
Because, well, it's not that I've avoided it. I chose my path intentionally because I didn't want to be in a clinic room. I didn't want to be in a table and a bed and a computer. I wanted to be in the gym. I wanted to be around people, because that was where I started from. I started kind of all ranks almost. I started with a night course in fitness instruction, and I moved through all these diploma levels and went back to university in my mid-20s. But that was where I wanted to stay, in that middle bit, not in the room with the clinic and the red cross on the thing. But some people do. Some people genuinely do. And my advice is what I just said. I'd make sure they think about the difference between the physio clinical room and the actual rehab in the gym, because there is a difference there. It's a very different day job when you do the two very well. But what advice would you have for a PT or a yoga instructor who wants to prep, say, for an application?
For me, I'll get onto the application shortly. I think physio should be starting to get closer to strength and conditioning / active rehab.
Yeah, there's a lot of physios I know that do like clinical Pilates, just because it wasn't like you can't just give someone a piece of paper and go do these exercises.
Exactly.
So,
and if we add into the stuff we talked about today, that we know that pain isn't always generated from the pain sources, and that people feel better with not a very specific treatment, is that should we be actually improving their tolerance to do the things they want to do, to pick up their kids or to sit all day at work. And the only way we can do that and change the tissue is by changing the tissue physiology. And it'd be great if a press and a prod would change the tissue. It makes us feel better. But the only thing we know in research that changes that is exercise. Mm-hmm. Mainly resistance exercise, high load, and increasing your intolerance to these loads. So for me, I see physio going down that exercise, strength conditioning route. I was lucky enough when I worked in Faz Lane that I was in the gym. I had a really good setup there. I had some clinic rooms for privacy, but the rest of it was active. It's where I kind of want to go. I did a lot of work in football with the kind of youth players, and it was all gym-based, movement-based. So that scope is there for physiotherapy. So if there is people in the fitness industry thinking they want to do it and they're worried about the clinical side of it, the clinical side of it isn't technically a room and a computer. We need that. Mm-hmm. The clinical side of it is the clinical thought process. Right. So does the information the person has given you add up with the information you know about biology, anatomy, pathology, and do you then have a good enough of research on that area to say to them, this would be your probably best course to do? That could be done outside, it could be done right here, it could be done in a really nice clinic. Some people like a quiet clinic, some people like music, some people like a busy one, some people like it on their own. That starts to get in the specifics of it. For someone wanting to do it, go and try it. Go and shadow, which is what I did as a kid. So I went around the hospitals. I liked it. I did a lot of sport. I'd had experience of it. But there's other options out there. There is, if you wanted, other manual therapies out there, if that's what they want to do, that manual thing. Unfortunately, the kind of research is suggesting that it's not strong enough, so is it worthwhile? But there is other rehab therapies out there. So there is sports rehabilitation courses. There is sports therapy courses, things like that. I met a couple of guys when I was working at a good football club who didn't have a physio degree and they were running the under-20s, and the knowledge and ability and programming out of these guys blew me out of the water, hands down. So there is other options out there. So it's maybe having a go, getting round, having a look, seeing what fit it is, seeing is it the gym fit they want, is it the clinical fit, is it a hospital fit, is it going and visiting around people's houses fit, and getting a bit of practice. And then there, even something like physiotherapy though has got several options once you're in practice.
Cool. So where can people get in touch with you online, or you're at the physio centre with
I'm
Miffy?
at the physio centre with Miffy in DHCC. Pretty new, so come and say hi. and we are online. We are on Instagram. I'm just about to start a wee Instagram myself. And
Have you set one up yet?
I've got it going. I need some content, but
What's your...
Amazing. We'll tag you.
I'll pass it on. I'm Physio Almanac, so the Scottish Physio.
The Scottish Physio is the handle?
It's in Gaelic, so...
Spell it for us.
Physio Almanac, ALBANNACH.
ALBANNACH.
That's it.
Okay, we'll find
Amazing.
it. Yeah.
Brian, thank you so much for
Very
coming
welcome.
today. It was so interesting talking to you. Amazing.
Cool. Thanks very much.
Guys, cheers.